it's difficult to reach out to people most at the time when you maybe need to. But yeah, it's also important to vent frustration.
Yeah.
So there are a few people that I can talk to, and they know the situation here, and they understand that I get very, well, just irritated and I'm mainly tired really, because the problem is that Catherine wakes up every night, and like last night, for example, we had 5 interruptions to sleep, and that's not unusual. So I'm just mainly sleep deprived. is the biggest issue.
Right, thank you for joining us, everybody. Welcome to our Facebook Live session today. So today we are going to be looking at a topic that isn't often addressed, and it's about men who are caring for women in their lives living with dementia. So we run these dementia, Unpacking Dementia series just to start to unpick those different topics that we don't always have access to. And we are not the experts in all areas, so we are incredibly lucky to pull external experts that we can talk to about today. So today, the importance around this conversation is really that caring is often seen as that female role, but actually today we're going to hear from men's voices and experience. So I'm incredibly lucky to be joined by Scott and John today. Scott, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi there, my name's Scott Mitchell. My late wife was Dame Barbara Windsor, and I cared for her through her dementia journey, which from diagnosis to her own passing was 6 years. I was her primary carer.
Thanks, Scott. And those of you who've joined us before will remember we did a session around community inclusion a little while ago. So thank you so much for coming back, Scott. It's brilliant to have you on board again. And John, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hello. I'm John Crawford. I look after my wife, who has frontal lobe dementia. She had a stroke in 2021. Sorry, just chatting to me in the background there. She had a stroke in 2021 and has been needing 24-hour care ever since that. And I'm the primary carer. So my journey is ongoing.
It is. And I know John and I, we've met, haven't we, on one of our Dementia Adventure holidays. And I've seen the work that you do with Kathy, and it's an amazing job, but it is a full-time care job, isn't it? So thank you both for joining us. Just a bit of housekeeping before we start. Any questions or comments you've got, please pop them in the chat and we will do our best to address those. If you've got any questions and we don't get around to addressing those, we will pick those up after today's session and come back to you. And as always, thank you ever so much to Right at Home for supporting these sessions and sponsoring those. So let's get started. And I'm going to come to you, Scott, and just ask you to tell us a little bit about your experience as your role caring for Barbara.
Yeah, I think what happens is, well, certainly what happened with me was, I think it's a slow process is what happens, because you don't initially realize that you are the carer, that you are actually caring, because it happens over a period of time. And unless, of course, there's a sudden incapacity that happens, for instance, with a stroke or something like that, would be a different situation. But with Barbara's Alzheimer's, it was a gradual process for me, which meant that at first I just thought, well, okay, I need to do a little bit more. But I certainly didn't identify myself as a carer. It was only as time went on, it was only as I had to do more and more, that I personally realized I was Barbara's carer. And everything had changed.
Yeah. So it was a gradual step into that role. And John, I think your experience was a little different, wasn't it? Did you recognise yourself sooner as a carer?
Yeah, I mean, I'd seen the current situation coming for some time ahead, because Catherine had the stroke in 2021. But prior to that, she'd had the brain tumour in 1994, and we'd been on a very slow, gradual down, journey from there. She was functioning quite well for 20 years, and then in 2012 it was noticeable that she couldn't function at work anymore and had to be medically retired. And then her balance just got worse and worse until she was having lots of falls. She'd go off into town and so on her own, but I get phone calls saying she's had a fall and so on. And her memory just got worse and worse. And you notice things like all of a sudden she can't operate the TV remote control anymore without being told what to do time after time, and just little signs like that gradually get worse and worse. And then the step change, of course, was the stroke, in which case she's now confined to a wheelchair, which makes life extra difficult.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing from both of you, I think both of you have talked about that practical side of caring. And I think, it's the picking up, it's the doing more of. But I think what we often don't talk about is that emotional step into caring. And I'm going to come to you. How did you find that? Was that something that you kind of dealt with, afterwards? In your case, Scott, is it something that, is just a part of, what that is? But I think as women, we're often quite good at talking about that emotional side, whereas I think for men, that's a little more challenging. Was that your experience? And
Yeah.
John, I'll go. Sorry, Scott, go
Sorry, no,
ahead.
go ahead, John.
No, go.
John, go ahead, John. Continue what John was saying. Go ahead.
Yeah, John, was that something you found?
Well, I mean, it's an emotional roller coaster, as Scott will know, where 1 minute you've got empathy for the person with the dementia or the person you're looking after, and at other times it's just very frustrating because you can't do what you want to do at the speed that you would normally do it. So you have to just have endless patience, really, and that's quite difficult at times.
Yeah, I'll echo exactly what John said. To be able to cope with, and I think especially on the dementia front as well, with those adjustments, with things like, I can remember when Barbara couldn't pick an outfit out for herself anymore, when she couldn't do her makeup anymore, and also, of course, the repetitive nature where she would repeat things the whole time. You've got to be a complete saint if you don't get irritable at some point. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that we do our best. And there were times when I did get irritable, and there were times when she'd say something at first and I'd contradict her. It was just because I was frustrated. I think the thing for me behind all of it is I was scared. I was so incredibly scared of what was happening to her. And I knew I was really powerless. And I found that some of my frustration and irritability came from my own fear.
And I think that's absolutely human. I think that makes us all human. But did you find this was something you could reach out and speak to, like, social connections about? Did you find that you had friends or colleagues, people that were in your life that you were able to talk to, or was that quite isolating for you?
It was isolating. I think, maybe in our situation, which was a little bit different with Barbara being in the public eye, no one knew about this. So I was also keeping this as quite a massive secret as well, because she didn't want to talk about it. So I had a selective few people that I could talk to. And I think the importance of sharing with someone close to you is imperative for your own mental well-being and for your own sanity, I would say.
Yeah.
But it's not always easy to reach out, and not everyone can talk openly.
Yeah. What was your experience, John?
Yeah, very similar. It's difficult to reach out to people most at the time when you maybe need to. But yeah, it's also important to vent frustration.
Yeah.
So there are a few people that I can talk to, and they know the situation here, and they understand that I get very, well, just irritated and just well, I'm mainly tired really because the problem is that Catherine wakes up um, every night, and like last night, for example, we had 5 interruptions to sleep, and that's not unusual.
Mm.
So I'm just mainly sleep deprived. Is the biggest issue.
And that, of course, brings those feelings of frustration. And, it's sleep deprivation is incredibly challenging. Well, they used it as a torture format, didn't they? To deprive people of sleep. So we know the impact that that can have. But I think, yeah, I mean, there's a couple of people, Joseph in the chat has said actually it took somebody else to point out he was a carer before he realised. And Carla said he's always been the one to fix things, but this isn't something you can fix. And on some of the support sessions that we run, particularly our mood and motivation session, we actually start by unpicking, our mood and motivation as in that role, that supportive role, because it is really challenging. And I think, yeah, frustration is one of the ones that comes up. Guilt comes up a lot,
Mm.
I want to be able to make this better and I can't. Tiredness, like you've just said, John, absolutely comes up, and it does lead to that real drain and just the ability to kind of think things through and respond, doesn't it? It's really, really
I, I, I,
challenging.
I think as well, when you're going through it's another thing that the sleep deprivation and the complete tiredness, you learn to live in that mode. So it
Mm.
actually becomes your reality is being totally exhausted the whole time, and you function in that way. But of course, for any of us, at some point we have to try and recharge in some way that we can
Yeah,
take those moments of support and care that we get to really try and recharge ourselves as we go through it, because it was the same for me with Barbara's mobility. At night she'd have falls, etc. She'd try and get out of the bed and then she'd fall, and I'd hear her, so I'd go rushing in to help her. So I didn't sleep well. And the truth with me is we're now over 5 years down the line. I'm not sure my own sleep has recovered properly. I still wake up during the night at times,
yeah,
and sometimes I panic thinking I should be listening
yeah,
out for her.
yeah.
It's a very strange process to go through.
Yeah, there's a huge emotional strain that comes with
Mm.
this. And
Mm.
John, would you echo that? Is that something you echo as well?
Yeah, definitely. Um,
Yeah,
the problem is the the sleep issue is such a problem that if we have live-in carers occasionally to give me a break, they we did have a situation where we had a live-in carer who phoned me up while I was on holiday to say, I can't cope with this anymore. She's keeping me up all night. Well, yeah, I know. I live with it. So we had to, while I was on holiday, we had to parachute in a night carer as well as the day carer.
Mm.
Um,
mm.
it was just, which doesn't give me a break because then I'm managing things from when I'm
You're
supposed to.
managing a carer as well, aren't
Yeah.
you? Yeah.
You're
And I
never.
think there's often people outside of these circumstances often think, well, you've got somebody coming in, so then you can go and rest. But you can't just turn that off. You don't suddenly stop listening. You don't suddenly stop hearing noises in the night, do you, or responding? And yeah, I think it can be a really lonely place.
Mm.
And yeah, and I think one of the things that certainly, a lot of the sessions I've run, um, one of the key focuses that's come up time and time again is the changes in those relationship dynamics, where you are stepping. I think for women it's often quite a maternal role. We parent our children, and they're always our children. Even when they're grown up, they're still our children. That doesn't change. But then we sort of use that skill set into that role when we then support a partner or a parent living with dementia. But I think for men that appears to be a little more challenging, and like dealing with those changes in those relationship dynamics can be really tough as well. And is that something that you found in both your circumstances?
Well, I would say no because I've got no experience of being a parent. So, but it's almost like having a child that I never had because
Mm,
unfortunately it's the same level of care that's required for, looking after a small child.
So it's stepping into a new role, isn't it?
But of course, the child is adult size and can't be carried around quite so easily. So it's
Yeah.
Yeah, I had the same experience, John, because I've never had children either. So for me, it really was a wake up call. Of that, it was my first time of really having to put someone else's needs first to that kind of degree, and also the kind of care that you're having to give them as well. Because as you say, it is like caring for a child, and that will include their personal hygiene. It will include helping them go to the bathroom, toilet duties. You are suddenly faced with things as an adult which, if you haven't been a parent, you have never been faced with, and that can be quite an emotional shock as well within itself for you to cope with. Is what I found.
yeah, and I think,
So
sorry,
go on, John.
stops you from doing things that you might normally want to do because you think you're thinking of the worst scenario when you go out somewhere, what might happen.
Yeah.
It could turn into an embarrassing situation. At least I did in the initial couple of years of having to look after Catherine, that it would stop me doing things because I just thought what's
Preempting.
happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that really sums up, doesn't it, around that stigma, that expectation and that isolation that caring for somebody can bring, particularly, yeah, in that
Yeah.
adult world.
Your world becomes smaller.
Yeah.
That's
And
what happens. The world becomes smaller, and if you're lucky, you have those friends that do still come and visit. But it gets to a point, or it got to a point for me in the last 18 months or so, where it was more difficult for Barbara to go out. So I did rely on people dropping in, and that's not always the case. It doesn't always happen. People have their own lives to get on with, so you can find yourself in quite a lonely situation.
But I'm going to slightly turn this on its head as well, because I think it's really important we acknowledge the challenges of caring. And what we will do after today's session is we have got many organisations we will signpost to where if actually people want to reach out and find support, particularly men, then we will signpost to those organisations because there's some really good ones out there. But I mean, I've been in a care position myself. I think it teaches us a lot as well. And whilst there is many challenges, I know, John, I've spent time with you on holiday and we've had some really lovely times. And I know, Scott, when we've spoken before, I'm going to ask you both, what has caring taught you on the more positive side?
I think for me, it taught me a lot about myself, of how compassionate I can be, of my inner strength when it really comes to it, when it really came to stepping up, overcoming fears, overcoming my own fears, putting myself to one side and putting someone else's needs first primarily. And it was also a blessing and a gift when I look back to be able to care for my wife in the way that I did.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. I think, and I think you've echoed that before when we've spoken, haven't you? What about you, John? Obviously, still in that care role as well.
Yeah, well, I would echo what Scott's just said. It does. It is sometimes feels like a privilege, not always, but definitely it has that element to it, and it gives you a purpose in life, of course, beyond the more trivial things you might want to do, I suppose. And just like a parent looking after a child, I suppose there's no greater gift than being able to look after someone.
I think sometimes what it also enables us to do is just focus on the beauty of some of the more simple sides of life. I think life as an adult is so complex. There's always so much going on. It's so busy. And certainly in the role, when I was supporting my grandfather, it gave me the time just to sit with him, just being with him was okay. And actually, there was a real beauty around being able to do that. You know, I think sometimes when we were away, I think we went to the beach, didn't we, John? We got Kathy in one of our buggies and on the beach, and it was just watching, you know, maybe just having a nice, life slows down. And I think whilst that could be challenging, there's also an element of real beauty about that. Is that something you would you maybe experienced?
I think the benefits of going on the Dementia Adventure holidays is that you can genuinely wind down because you're not at home. Because at home there's always something you can think of that you ought to be doing,
Yeah.
and it's also nice on those sorts of things where you're not having to think about what you're needing to do all the time because you're just taken along with the group, and that gives a sense of relief to let someone else do all the planning and just go with it. Um, so yeah, that's the sort of thing that I enjoy, and
That was the break you got.
yeah.
Yeah. What about for you, Scott? Was life able to, you know, take a step back a little bit, particularly with Barbara being in the public eye? You know, that must come with some amazing privilege, but also some challenges as well, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, especially in the situation that we were in as well, because, you know, there was a lot of management that had to go around um, her care in that way when we did go out. It's just like John said, you know, my fear of something happening while we were out, or, you know, whether that would have been an unfortunate situation where we couldn't get to a bathroom in time, or whether it would have been an emotional outburst that she may have had. It's a very strange thing. I can only look in reflection now. I think what I would say is that time was very precious, even though it was difficult and challenging, and at times felt unbearable for me. When I look back, I think how precious the time that she was still with us was,
Yeah.
and to really make the most of that, however challenging it can feel some days.
Did you find either of you when you were out and about that as a male carer, people might address you differently to, say, a female carer? Did you find that was something you came up across, or is that not something it was never really brought to your attention?
I've never been a female carer, so wouldn't know what the difference.
Fair enough. Okay. What about for you, Scott? Did you find it was okay to access services? You know, there was support available when you were out and about if you needed it.
Yeah. I think look, I think that we live in a world, thankfully, where things are spoken about more. And I think we all realise if we do see, whether it be the male who is looking after someone, we accept that we can see what they are doing. I don't think I can say I was ever treated differently. If anything, I think people could be very complimentary and say, you know, what, it's a wonderful thing what you are doing, caring for your wife in this way. But I don't see that personally as a gender thing. I think that's generally, you know,
That
being
is as a caring role.
a
So you
carer
wouldn't say
is a
that
wonderful
caring has
thing.
really, gender doesn't really play into this. It's not something that's impacted your feelings of masculinity, for example. It is just been a part of your role and what you did.
Yeah, personally, yeah.
Yeah. Same for you, John.
Yeah, I think so. I think you know, people are complimentary, I suppose, and say, I don't know how you do what you do, but I say, well, what's the alternative, really? You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think really starting to round things up, I'm going to ask both of you individually, if you came across another man who was at the beginning of this journey and didn't yet see themselves as a carer, what advice or encouragement would you give?
I think as far as encouragement, I would say please know that you're doing the best you can, and I'm sure you are. It's very easy to have feelings of guilt. It's very easy to beat yourself up and think you should be getting it right the whole time, or that you should be doing more. when that's not always possible, because, you know, a lot of the time with a lot of people, you're learning as you go along. So you can only do the best you can. And with dementia, it's an ever-changing illness as well. So different things and symptoms will happen to challenge you at different times. So I'd say try and be a bit gentle on yourself. Please reach out for help when you need it, because there comes a point when you can't do everything yourself and you will need some assistance. And there's nothing to be ashamed of in saying I could do with some support here.
Brilliant. Thanks, Scott. And for you, John?
Yeah, I would echo what Scott says as well, and say, yeah, you need someone you can talk to, because you have to release the frustrations somehow, or find an activity that can help you just
absolutely
de-stress from all the daily pressures.
And I think that's a really, really powerful message. And it's certainly one that we would echo at Dementia Adventure. I think to kind of round up this morning, I would absolutely encourage anybody on this session to engage with their local carer support. And you can Google, you put in your postcode, you Google that, and it will tell you what carer support is available. Or you can look at organisations such as Carers Trust and Carers UK, because they are a fantastic support, and they are places that can, offer support around anything from finances to, what physical support is available. They can link you in with adult social care. And they can also offer that support around dementia in a lot of cases. So, and if not, do access things like our support sessions. We are there to educate and support you to understand and navigate this journey where we can do. But I think it's we know that 3/4 of diagnosis of dementia are given to women. And yet I know in the demographics I work in that the majority of people who access and ask for help are also women. So there's an awful lot of male carers out there. And I hope today has been a real insight that actually it is a journey you go on. There is help available. And, like you've both said, there is some pluses. It's tough, but there's help out there as well. So before we round up today's session, thank you so much for both of you joining us today. Is there one final message you would give to any male carers out there before we round up?
Yeah, I'd say I could see a few messages popping up on the board with questions. If there were any for me, I'd be quite happy, Ruth, for you to send them on to me via email. And if I can answer anything specific, then I'm very happy to do that. But I'd just say, do your best. Keep strong,
keep going.
But look after yourself as well. Very importantly, look after you.
Thank you, Scott. And John?
Yeah,
any final words?
Carer support were very helpful in the early stages of when I needed help. So unfortunately, my carer support locally has just closed down. But if you have one near you, certainly reach out to it. Yeah.
It's tough, isn't it? It's hard to round up a really long, intensive journey into a few words, but I absolutely appreciate all the support and insight you've given us today. Thank you so much, Scott and John, for joining us. I know what we've spoken about will be invaluable for many people. So on that note, thanks again for joining us on today's session, and we look forward to seeing you again on a future session. Take care, look after yourselves.